So there's some interesting research being conducted. You may have even come across it online. Studies that started at the Imperial College in London, and they've gone on to be, you know, more advanced research being conducted at the University of South Florida. And the research is basically looking at magic mushrooms, or psilocybin to be specific, psilocybin's ability to repair brain damage that's the result of, you know, extreme trauma or severe stress that somebody may have encountered. Now, the research has been conducted largely on rodents so far. I think there's been some in vitro studies, and I believe that currently there's human clinical trials taking place. But, you know, it's really interesting stuff, because the key factor in this research is exploring the field of neurogenesis, or the ability to kind of regrow neurons, to actually regrow nervous tissue within the brain, to actually regrow brain cells, which was something that, you know, up until not that long ago was believed to not be possible. So the research basically indicates that psilocybin is not only able to stimulate neurogenesis and stimulate the growth of new brain cells, but it's actually able to repair damaged neurons and actually reroute neural pathways within the brain. So, you know, people that maybe have suffered some kind of extreme trauma, and because of that trauma, they now have this habitual tendency to react negatively to situations that come up in their lives. It's like, you know, social anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, conditions like this. So by actually rerouting the neural pathways in the brain, technically speaking, we would be able to avoid these kind of repetitive habitual tendencies, you know, of feeling very anxious, feeling very fear-driven, making a lot of decisions in our life based around fear because of trauma that we've suffered in the past. So this would apply to like actual physical injuries in the brain, but also, you know, if there's kind of blocked blood flow or restricted blood flow in the brain, people that have suffered from strokes, people that, you know, have suffered very deep emotional trauma in their lives, or, you know, just any kind of traumatic experience, whether it be physical, mental, and emotional, that can leave a very long, deep-seated negative imprint on our cognitive function. So psilocybin mushrooms have certainly shown a very genuine influence on repairing and having a kind of normalizing effect on areas of the brain like the prefrontal lobe, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and really the entire cerebral cortex, the kind of fatty protective layer that surrounds the brain. So generally speaking, repairing and normalizing the function of all of these areas can have an effect on healing memory issues like, you know, short and long-term memory loss and memory fragmentation. It can have an influence on regulating those habitually excessive fear-based reactions that people can have to experiences in life. It can really regulate addictive tendencies and addiction to any kind of sensory pleasure, can really regulate our ability to understand consequences in life and actually, you know, how to have a healthy social conduct in the world. And it's very good at helping us to manage information overwhelm, which is something that, you know, so many people are suffering with these days. So, you know, it can really help stabilizing repetitive emotional turbulence and allow us to interact more fluidly with our surroundings and have a much greater adaptability, you know, and an ability to navigate stress with more of a minimal impact. So, you know, that could look a bit like reduced panic and anxiety and more of a kind of robust and resilient mental and emotional outlook that can really serve as a platform for personal growth and spiritual exploration. So these aforementioned areas of the brain that are, you know, integral to conditions like PTSD, social anxiety, and any kind of chronic fear-based experiences that people have as the result of previous trauma in their lives, these parts of the brain can potentially receive a kind of servicing from psilocybin that helps to restore a more balanced, normal, healthy function, and new pathways can be explored that can open up new horizons for people that, you know, are perhaps enslaved to this trauma-based perception in their lives. And so this could really allow people to be residing less in that fight or flight state when they're just trying to make it through the day. You know, the fundamental operating systems of the brain can become somewhat rewritten, and a new, much more balanced, healthy mental and emotional behavior can be the result. I find it absolutely fascinating that this kind of neuroplasticity is pretty much exactly what we see from the behavior of fungal mycelium in natural ecosystems, because it permeates the rhizosphere of the forest, of the natural environment, and networks a vast number of different interspecies alliances. So it's actually forming alliances with not just other fungi, but with plants and with animals as well. And the mycelium is able to target problem areas of the ecosystem, sites of injury or disease, and it can channel medicinal nutrients to these areas, to these plants, to these animals even, for healing. And if that's not possible, then it's able to eliminate these problem areas as fast as possible by breaking them down and recycling them into life-sustaining nourishment that can benefit the entire ecosystem, can benefit the entire mycelial internet that's been created. Mycelium is pretty much identical to the human nervous system in both function and appearance. And so many species of edible and medicinal mushrooms have a function-enhancing and regenerative effect on the human nervous system when we consume them. So I think it makes a kind of poetic sense that such powerfully psychoactive mushrooms that are capable of expanding the horizons of consciousness would actually be able to restore the structure and function of neurological pathways within the brain. Now, obviously, this is all hypothetical. You know, I'm not advocating that anybody go out and take a load of magic mushrooms for this purpose. I'm not recommending that anybody should do it. Anybody that's suffered from extreme traumatic experiences in their lives that have resulted in long-term conditions of stress and anxiety. But that said, dosage is still an important part of this discussion, even if it is from a hypothetical perspective. Now, you know, taking a whole load of magic mushrooms is not going to repair more and more brain cells. It's not going to replace more and more neurological tissue within the brain. The studies that have been done, I believe, were done on very low doses, that there was no known psychoactive effects within the test subjects, which largely up until this point have been rodents, but a lot of the physically regenerative benefits were still very much noticeable. But that said, it's still so important not to underestimate the healing potential of even a low psychoactive dose, because a lot of human studies have been done for a very long time now on terminally ill patients and patients, you know, suffering with stage 4 cancer, and they've basically got a few months left to live. They're very, very anxious about their imminent death. You know, they're very fear-driven and unable to accept the eventuality of their own imminent demise. And lots of people in this situation over many decades now have been taking magic mushrooms, they've been taking psilocybin, and they've been experiencing a dramatic transformation in their whole perception of life and death, and actually able to embrace the coming experience of the end of their life with much more grace, ease, and, you know, be able to let go of the attachment to this life and all of the connections that they've made in this life. So, you know, it's definitely not to be underestimated, the healing power of a psychoactive dose of psilocybin mushrooms. But, you know, taking way too many can result for some people in another traumatic experience, which is going to ultimately undermine the healing benefits that could be available to people that need to repair nervous tissue within the brain and actually restructure neurological pathways within their own thinking. So ultimately, the psychoactive capacity of psilocybin is unfathomably potent and transformative, but in my opinion, it really must be entered into with the reverence of a shaman, because approaching such a sacred organism with mindlessness can all too often result in a kind of schooling of cosmically dramatic proportions.